It is not true that life must arise where we happen to find it. That is a comfortable belief. It almost feels self-evident. If a planet is habitable, we assume, then sooner or later chemistry will make the leap and something capable of replication will appear. The idea seems plausible because, on Earth, life appears not to have wasted any time. As soon as conditions stabilized, the earliest traces of biological activity emerged like a shadow that could no longer be erased. And yet there is a detail that unsettles this intuition. The window between young and hostile planet and living world may have been surprisingly narrow, and we still do not know whether that leap is easy, rare, or even unique. From this uncertainty arises a temptation to move the origin elsewhere. Not by magic, but by statistics. If life had billions of years and countless locations in which to attempt its emergence, it is not unreasonable to imagine that it appeared somewhere else first, and only later traveled. The word that gathers this temptation is panspermia, seeds everywhere. It is an ancient idea, already suggested in philosophical form in the Greek world, and revived in the modern era with a more concrete question. If rocks can travel, can microbes travel with them? The history of panspermia swings like a pendulum between cautious science and excessive storytelling. On one side are scientists who have tried to frame testable versions of the hypothesis. On the other, interpretations that have chased spectacular correlations, such as epidemics blamed on the passage of comets, without solid experimental grounding. That drift has left a scar. For many, the word itself sounds like an invitation to pseudoscience. And yet there is a version that, at least in principle, remains within the boundaries of the scientific method. Lithopanspermia, life on stone. It speaks not of spacecraft or deliberate intervention, but of impacts, fragments, trajectories. We know that major collisions can tear material from a planet's surface and hurl it beyond the atmosphere. We also know that pieces of other worlds reach us. The most direct evidence comes from Martian meteorites, rocks identified as originating from Mars through their chemical and isotopic signatures, found on Earth after journeys that began with distant impacts. This does not prove they carry life. But it does prove that the courier exists. The most seductive part of the argument is psychological. It seems to resolve the mystery of life's origin by explaining how quickly Earth became inhabited. Yet the seduction conceals a logical trap. Shifting the origin does not eliminate it. Life must still arise somewhere. The only advantage is that elsewhere the available time may be greater, and the number of candidate worlds far larger. There is also another element, more concrete and less controversial. Even without transporting complete organisms, space appears to produce and distribute chemical building blocks. Complex organic molecules have been found in meteorites and cometary samples, including amino acids and compounds capable of participating in prebiotic chemistry. This is not yet life, but it is as if the universe were delivering ready-made ingredients to a young planet. A form of external assistance, almost a panspermia, that makes it more plausible that Earth's origin of life was not entirely isolated from the wider cosmos. Then there is the dynamics of planetary systems. In our solar system, distances are vast but not infinite. Mars and Earth, in particular, have exchanged, and continue to exchange, material in ways that are rare but real, especially during periods of intense bombardment. In more compact systems, where several rocky planets orbit close to one another, exchange could be far more frequent. A frequently cited example is TRAPPIST-1, with 7 rocky worlds packed tightly around a small, cool star. In such an architecture, a catastrophic impact on one planet could scatter debris that intersects neighboring orbits in relatively short times. Yet this very possibility creates a paradox for those who dream of two independent origins. If tomorrow we were to find life on Mars based on the same fundamental biochemistry as ours, we would not automatically have proof of a second genesis. We might instead have uncovered a story of planetary contagion. And so, before deciding whether panspermia belongs to fantasy or physics, one harder question remains. One that cannot be settled by a trajectory calculated on a computer. Can life, or at least a robust organism, truly survive the journey? The journey is no peaceful corridor. It is a selective massacre. First comes ejection, shock waves, immense pressures, localized heating. Then space. Vacuum, cold, thermal cycles, ultraviolet radiation, energetic particles that break chemical bonds and damage genetic material. Finally comes arrival. Atmospheric entry, surface heating, impact. Fail at any one of these stages and the idea collapses. And yet biology has an irritating habit of finding exceptions. Certain terrestrial microorganisms, such as some bacterial spores, display extreme resilience. Not because they are invincible, but because they enter dormant states, reduce internal chemistry to a minimum, and shield themselves with protective layers and efficient repair mechanisms. There are also organisms such as tardigrades that, under particular conditions, endure dehydration in vacuum better than common sense would suggest. Laboratory and orbital experiments have tested survival under vacuum, radiation, and thermal cycling. The result is neither total triumph nor easy refutation. A fraction can survive, especially if shielded. Here the rock reappears, not as a romantic vehicle, but as a shield. A few centimeters of material can drastically reduce ultraviolet radiation. Tens of centimeters or meters attenuate even part of the more energetic particles. This means that the core of a rocky fragment could be a better refuge than we imagine, while its surface is sterilized. Time, however, remains the problem. Between Mars and Earth, some fragments may take thousands or millions of years. Across interstellar distances, we enter timescales that swallow intuition. Tens or hundreds of millions of years, depending on velocities and gravitational encounters. In the laboratory, we cannot wait that long. We can accelerate damage through intense radiation and simulations, but acceleration is not identical to real time, because repair intervals, microfractures, thermal variations, and above all chance all matter. If panspermia has occurred, it may have been an exceedingly rare but decisive event. A single successful launch in an ocean of failed attempts. And it is precisely this rarity that makes it difficult to prove and easy to mythologize. To take lithopanspermia seriously, clear conditions are required, not suggestions. The first is physical. There must be a measurable flux of rocks between worlds, with realistic estimates of quantities, sizes, and travel times. On planetary scales, this is already partially satisfied, since meteorites provide samples and dynamical simulations allow frequency estimates. The second condition is biological. Organisms or structures capable of surviving the three bottlenecks, ejection, space, and re-entry, must be identified, and survival probabilities quantified as functions of shielding and time. It is not enough to say, some survive. We must know how long, and in what percentages. The third condition is chemical and geological. Once arrived, those microbes must find an environment in which to exit dormancy and replicate before being destroyed. Landing in a sterile desert or an acidic ocean may not suffice. A niche is required. There is then a fourth condition, the sharpest of all, because it concerns future evidence. If we were to find life elsewhere in the solar system, on Mars, beneath the ice of Europa or Enceladus, the crucial question would not simply be, is there life? But, is it related to us? If the biochemistry were identical in its deepest details, we might suspect a common origin and therefore transfer. If instead we were to discover life based on different principles, an incompatible genetic code or distinct informational molecules, we would gain powerful evidence that life can emerge more than once. In that case, panspermia would become less necessary as an explanation. Paradoxically, the most thrilling discovery for anyone seeking to understand life's origin would not be life, like ours, but life unlike ours, because it would sever the thread of contagion and demonstrate that the universe can invent more than once. When we widen our gaze beyond the solar system, another piece of evidence enters the picture, this time astronomical. In recent years, interstellar objects have been observed, bodies that do not belong to our system but pass through it as visitors. They prove that solid material can travel between stars. If we have seen only a few, it may mean they are rare, or that our eyes are still nearsighted. With better instruments, the statistics may grow. If material travels, the question becomes unavoidable. Does something more fragile travel as well, or at least something capable of sleeping for terrifying spans of time? In regions of the galaxy where stars are closer together, traffic might be denser, making a fortunate transfer less improbable. Yet caution is essential. Increased traffic does not solve the problems of time and radiation. In the end, panspermia remains an open possibility, suspended between two forces. On one side, physics tells us that the transport of rocks is real. On the other, biology whispers that survival is hard. In between stands chemistry, reminding us that space is not empty of molecules and that some of life's ingredients may arrive ready-made, rendering the emergence of complexity on a young planet less miraculous. The difference between a scientific idea and a seductive story lies in what we demand before believing it: numbers, constraints, repeatable experiments, falsifiable predictions. Lithopanspermia can, at least in part, meet those demands. Versions that invoke intentions, messages, or easy correlations with terrestrial events, without robust data, slip beyond the boundary. And yet there is a reason this idea keeps returning, even under scrutiny. Not because it offers a comfortable answer, but because it compels us to see life as something that may not be confined to the surface of a single world. If life can be transported, then the galaxy is not merely a collection of isolated planets, but a sparse network of possibilities, with slow and sporadic exchanges. In that picture, the question, "Where do we come from?" changes shape. It no longer asks only in which pool of water the first leap occurred, but also which path made that leap visible here, right here, in this corner of an otherwise ordinary planetary system. And the most unsettling truth is that, whatever the answer, it does not remove the mystery. It shifts it. It expands it. It makes it cosmic. And that means that to resolve it, it will not be enough to find a special rock or a resilient microbe. We will have to learn to distinguish, within life's signature, what is universal from what is genealogy, what is inevitable chemistry from what is history, and what appears to be an origin from what may instead have been an arrival. If you have made it this far, it means you love curiosity as much as we do. If you enjoyed this journey, leave a like, write a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It is the best way to support what we do. Your presence truly makes a difference. Until our next exploration.